The alarm bells rang across Luna Station at exactly 3:47 a.m. Earth time. Commander Riley Chun had been sleeping when the urgent call came through. She stumbled out of her quarters, still in her sleeping clothes, rushing toward the communication center. The night shift officer, David Park, looked pale as he handed her the decoded message. "Ma'am, you need to see this. It came through our deep space monitoring array 30 minutes ago." Riley took the tablet and felt her blood turn cold. The message was written in perfect English, which was impossible. No alien civilization they knew of had mastered human language. But there it was, crystal clear and terrifying. "To the inhabitants of the star system you call Sol, we are the Hegemony Empire. We have observed your species for the past 50 Earth years. Your expansion into nearby star systems has been noted. You will now submit to Imperial rule. Failure to comply will result in complete termination of your species." Riley read the message 3 times before the full weight hit her. 50 years of observation. They had been watching humanity since the early days of Mars colonization. Every achievement, every technological breakthrough, every expansion to new worlds, all of it had been under alien eyes. The communication officer, a young woman named Lisa Torres, pointed to the technical readings. "Commander, the signal didn't come from any known direction. It appeared simultaneously at every human outpost across 12 star systems. Whatever sent this has technology we can't even understand." Riley immediately called an emergency session with Earth's Global Defense Council. Within 2 hours, representatives from every major nation and colony were connected through quantum communication links. The Brazilian president looked stunned. The Japanese prime minister kept asking if this was some kind of elaborate hoax. The Mars governor demanded to know why they hadn't detected any alien ships. Dr. Alex Webb, Earth's leading expert on alien technology, joined the call from his laboratory in Switzerland. He had spent 15 years studying mysterious artifacts found on distant worlds, objects that seemed too advanced for any known civilization. Now those puzzle pieces were falling into place. "I've been tracking unusual energy signatures for years," Dr. Webb explained to the council. "Radio telescope arrays have picked up artificial signals from sectors of space we thought were empty. We assumed they were natural phenomena, but now I think we were being watched the entire time." The hegemony's demands were specific and brutal. 40% of all human resources would be shipped to Imperial collection points. This included metals, energy sources, manufactured goods, and scientific research. 40% of all food production would be redirected to feed Imperial forces. Most horrifying of all, 40% of Earth's population would be taken as tribute workers, soldiers, and breeding stock for the Empire's expansion. President Jackson of the North American Federation asked the question everyone was thinking: what happens if we refuse? Dr. Webb pulled up holographic displays showing deep space telescope images. These are star systems that went silent over the past century. We always assumed the civilizations there had simply stopped broadcasting, but look at these recent images. The room fell silent as they saw the evidence. Planets reduced to barren rock, asteroid fields where moons used to orbit, solar systems stripped of everything valuable, left as empty monuments to imperial power. "The hegemony doesn't negotiate," Dr. Webb continued. "Every species that has refused their demands has been completely eliminated. Not just defeated, erased. Their ships crack planets like eggs. Their weapons turn entire worlds into space dust." Governor Martinez from the Jupiter colony spoke up, her voice shaking. "How long do we have?" The answer came in another transmission, arriving just as the council was debating their options. This time, the message included detailed star charts showing the positions of Imperial fleets. Massive bioships, each one the size of a small moon, were already moving toward human space. The nearest fleet would reach Earth's outer colonies in 6 months. 6 months to surrender or die, Riley said quietly. That's not enough time to build defenses. It's not enough time to evacuate. It's barely enough time to say goodbye. The debate that followed was unlike anything in human history. Military leaders wanted to fight, even though they knew it was hopeless. Earth's largest. Battleships were like insects compared to the imperial vessels shown in the star charts. Diplomatic officials suggested trying to negotiate better terms. But the hegemony's message had been clear: submit or be destroyed. It was Dr. Webb who first suggested the unthinkable. What if we don't give them anything to conquer? The room erupted in arguments. How could they abandon Earth? How could they leave behind centuries of human achievement? Where would they even go? But as the hours passed and more intelligence came in about imperial capabilities, the horrible logic became clear. Humanity couldn't win this war. Their ships were too slow, their weapons too weak, their numbers too small. The hegemony commanded fleets that had conquered hundreds of star systems. They had been perfecting the art of planetary conquest for thousands of years. We're talking about abandoning everything, President Jackson said. Every city, every monument, every grave where our ancestors are buried. Riley had been quiet for most of the debate, but now she stood up. Her voice was steady, but tears were running down her cheeks. My grandmother died defending Earth during the resource wars. My brother gave his life establishing the first permanent base on Europa. Every family in human space has sacrificed for our civilization. She paused, looking at each face on the holographic display. But what good are monuments to the dead if there are no living humans left to remember them? What good is Earth if there are no Earth children to inherit it? The vote was close, closer than anyone expected. But when the final count was finished, humanity had chosen survival over pride. They would attempt something that had never been tried before in galactic history. They would evacuate an entire species. The announcement went out to every human settlement simultaneously. The message was simple but devastating. All citizens are ordered to prepare for immediate evacuation. This is not a drill. Gather only essential supplies and irreplaceable personal items. Evacuation ships will arrive at each colony within 48 hours. This order applies to every human settlement from Earth to the Outer Rim colonies. Panic followed, then grief. Then slowly determination. Riley stood in the observation deck of Luna Station, looking down at Earth's blue oceans and green continents. Somewhere down there, her parents were packing their few precious belongings, preparing to leave the only world humanity had ever known. Across the solar system, 3 billion people were doing the same thing. Dr. Webb joined her at the observation window. Do you think we're making the right choice? Riley watched a transport ship launch from Earth's surface, carrying the first group of evacuees toward the waiting colony vessels. I think we're making the only choice that gives us a future. The hegemony wants to enslave us. Instead, we're going to disappear, let them rule over empty worlds and dead cities. The next few weeks would test every limit of human endurance and ingenuity. But for now, in this quiet moment before the storm, Riley allowed herself to hope. Somewhere in the vast darkness between the stars, humanity would find a new home. And someday, when they were strong enough, they would return. The Empire had demanded tribute. Earth's answer was already being written in the stars. The first evacuation ship arrived at Mars Colony 7 just as the morning shift was starting their day. Captain Elena Rodriguez had been flying cargo runs between the outer colonies for 12 years, but nothing had prepared her for this mission. Her ship, the Freedom's Hope, was designed to carry mining equipment and supplies. Now she was supposed to evacuate 15,000 people. How are we going to fit them all? Her co-pilot, Tony Kim, asked as they watched the crowds gathering at the spaceport below. Elena checked her manifest again. They had converted every cargo bay, every storage compartment, even the emergency airlocks into passenger space. People would be sleeping in shifts, eating emergency rations, and sharing recycled air for the 3-week journey to the rendezvous point beyond Neptune's orbit. Got down on the Martian surface, families were saying goodbye to everything they had built. The Henderson family had lived in Dome City for 3 generations. Old Jacob Henderson had been one of the original colonists who helped establish the first permanent settlement. Now his granddaughter, Amy, was helping him pack his few belongings into a single bag. "Grandpa, we can take more than that," Amy said. Watching him carefully fold his old Earth photographs, Jacob shook his head, touching the dome wall that had protected his family for 70 years. Child, memories don't weigh anything. Everything else can be replaced. But Amy saw the tears in his eyes as he looked one last time at the greenhouse where he had grown the first. Tomatoes on Mars. The evacuation wasn't just happening on Mars. Across 12 star systems, the same heartbreaking scenes were playing out. On Europa Station, Dr. Patricia Vance was destroying 15 years of research on alien microorganisms. She smashed computer drives with a hammer, wiped clean every database, and then set fire to her laboratory notes. If the hegemony wants our knowledge, they'll have to start from scratch, she told her assistant as they watched the flames consume decades of scientific breakthrough. The hardest decisions came at the outer rim colonies. Some settlements were so far away that evacuation ships couldn't reach them in time. At Mining Station Alpha 7, located near the edge of human space, 300 workers faced an impossible choice. Station Commander Blake Torres gathered everyone in the main assembly hall. His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. The evacuation fleet can't reach us for another 8 weeks. The Imperial Scouts will be here in 6. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. We can try to hide, Blake continued. Shut down all power, hope they don't notice us. Or we can make our stand here, buy time for the main evacuation fleets. Surprisingly, it was Maria Santos, the station's cook, who spoke first. My daughter is on one of those evacuation ships. If we can slow down the Imperial Scouts by even a few days, maybe she makes it to safety. One by one, the workers voted. They chose to fight. Meanwhile, back in the Sol system, the massive evacuation ships were arriving from every direction. Passenger liners, cargo haulers, military transports, even luxury cruise ships had been converted to carry refugees. The New Horizon, a colony ship originally designed to carry 10,000 people to establish new settlements, was now loaded with 40,000 evacuees. Commander Riley Chun had moved her operations to the New Horizon, coordinating the exodus from the ship's command center. Every day brought new challenges. Food supplies were running low. The life support systems were overloaded. Children were getting sick from the stress and overcrowding. We're losing people, Dr. Nina Patel reported during the daily briefing. Dr. Patel had volunteered to leave her comfortable practice on Earth to serve as chief medical officer for the evacuation fleet. The elderly especially? They can't handle the stress of leaving everything behind. Riley nodded grimly. They had known this would happen. The evacuation was saving humanity as a species, but it was killing individuals every day. The worst part was the children. 8-year-old Tommy Walsh kept asking when they were going home. His parents, Lisa and David, didn't know how to explain that home didn't exist anymore. That Earth, the only planet humans had ever known, was being abandoned. To an alien empire, will we ever see Earth again? Tommy asked his mother as they sat in their tiny compartment aboard the evacuation ship. Lisa held him close, looking out the porthole at the blue marble that was shrinking behind them. Maybe someday, honey, when we're stronger. But privately, she wondered if Tommy would even remember Earth by the time he grew up. Would the children born on the evacuation ships consider themselves homeless? Or would they be the first generation of a new kind of human, one that belonged to the stars instead of any single world? The evacuation fleet faced other problems. 2. Some ships were breaking down under the strain of carrying so many people. The Martian Dream lost its main engines halfway to the rendezvous point and had to be towed by 2 other vessels. The Europa's Pride developed a leak in its water recycling system, forcing the crew to ration drinking water for 3 weeks. Captain Rodriguez found herself making decisions she never thought she would face. When the Saturn's Hope suffered a catastrophic failure in its life support systems, there was only enough time to evacuate half the passengers before the ship became uninhabitable. She had to choose which families to save and which to leave behind. Take the children first. The ship's captain, an old friend named Robert Chang, told her over the radio. And the pregnant women. The rest of us will try to repair the systems. Rodriguez watched through her porthole as the Saturn's Hope fell behind the convoy. its lights flickering as the crew fought desperately to keep their ship alive. 3 days later, they received a final transmission. The repairs had failed. Captain Chang and 800 volunteers stayed with their ship so that 3,000 others could escape. Dr. Alex Webb was working around the clock to make sure the hegemony inherited nothing useful. His teams destroyed research facilities, wiped computer databases, and sabotaged the great terraforming projects that had taken centuries to complete. On Titan, they collapsed the atmosphere processors that had been slowly making the moon habitable. On Venus, they overloaded the orbital mirrors that were cooling the planet's surface. "We're destroying our own future," complained Dr. Jennifer Park, one of Webb's assistants, as they watched the Venus terraforming project burn up in the planet's atmosphere. "No," Webb replied, watching the flames consume decades of human achievement. "We're making sure our future is our own choice. The hegemony can rule over dead worlds, but they won't rule over us." The evacuation wasn't complete when the first Imperial scout ships appeared at the edge of the solar system. Long-range sensors detected them near Pluto, moving toward Earth with impossible speed. The rearguard fleet, the last ships carrying evacuees from Earth, had to abandon their careful loading procedures and launch immediately. Riley watched from the New Horizons command center as the final ships lifted off from Earth's surface, carrying the last humans to ever call the planet home. The blue world that had given birth to their species was now empty of human life for the first time in 300,000 years. "All ships report ready for jump to hyperspace," her communications officer announced. Riley took one last look at Earth through the viewscreen. Somewhere down there, the lights were still on in empty cities. The automated systems would keep running for a while, maintaining a pretense of life on a dead world. "Jump," she ordered. The evacuation fleet disappeared into the darkness between stars, carrying 3 billion refugees toward an uncertain future. Behind them, Earth waited alone for its new masters. The Imperial fleet arrived at Earth exactly when their message had promised. Admiral Keffer, commander of the hegemony's Third Conquest Fleet, stood on the bridge of his massive bioship as it entered Earth's solar system. His ship was alive. Grown rather than built, its hull pulsing with veins that carried nutrients and information throughout the vessel. "Report," he commanded his subordinate, a younger officer whose species had been conquered only 50 years earlier. "The system appears to be abandoned, Admiral. We're detecting no life signs on any of the inhabited worlds. The cities are empty, but intact. Power grids are still running." Kethvar's multiple eyes narrowed. In 3,000 years of conquest, he had never encountered a species that simply vanished. Species fought, they surrendered, they tried to hide. But they never just left everything behind and disappeared into space. Impossible. No species abandons their home system. Send scout teams to the major population centers. The scout teams that landed on Earth found something that disturbed even hardened Imperial soldiers. Cities full of empty houses, with meals still on tables and children's toys scattered in playgrounds. Automated systems kept the lights on and the air clean, but there was no one left to benefit from them. On Mars, the situation was the same. The great domed cities that had housed 3 million people were completely empty. The agricultural domes were still producing food, but there was no one to harvest it. The mining operations continued to extract resources, but the warehouses were filling with materials that no one would ever collect. Meanwhile, 6 months ahead of the Imperial fleet, Commander Riley Chun was dealing with problems she had never imagined. The evacuation fleet was running out of supplies. Food rationing had been reduced twice, and people were getting desperate. Worse, the children born during the journey were developing health problems from the cramped conditions and poor nutrition. Dr. Nina Patel reported to Riley during their daily briefing aboard the New Horizon. "We've lost 200 people this week. Mostly elderly, but some children too. The stress is killing them faster than starvation." "How much longer can we keep going?" Riley asked. "At this rate? Maybe 6 months before we start losing people. By the thousands." Riley stared at the star charts spread across her desk. They were heading toward empty space beyond any known star system. The plan was to keep moving until they found a world where they could rebuild. But every day took them further from anything that could support human life. That's when the first transmission came. Lieutenant Jackie Torres was monitoring communications when she picked up the signal. It wasn't coming from any human ship, and it definitely wasn't Imperial. The language was unknown, but there was something about the mathematical patterns that suggested intelligence. "Commander, you need to hear this." She called Riley to the communications center. The signal was weak and filled with static, but it was clearly artificial. More importantly, it was coming from the direction they were heading, the empty space. Beyond the galactic rim. Dr. Alex Webb was brought in to analyze the transmission. He had been studying alien technology for decades, and something about this signal felt familiar. "The mathematical structure is similar to patterns I've seen in ancient artifacts," he told Riley. "But this is different. It's like someone is trying to copy Imperial communication protocols, but they're doing it wrong on purpose." "You think it's a trick?" "No, I think it's someone who learned Imperial technology but doesn't want to be mistaken for them." Riley made the decision to alter course slightly, following the signal to its source. What they found changed everything. Hidden in a nebula that blocked most sensors, they discovered a vast collection of ships. Hundreds of vessels from dozens of different species, all refugees like themselves. They had been living in the void between stars for centuries, building a hidden civilization far from Imperial space. The first aliens to board the New Horizon were the Zephyrians, a race of crystal-like beings whose ships looked like living jewels. Their leader, whose name humans couldn't pronounce, spoke through a translation device. "Welcome, fellow exiles. We heard your ships approaching and hoped you were not Imperial hunters." Captain Elena Rodriguez, who had become Riley's second-in-command, asked the question everyone was thinking. "How long have you been out here?" "My people fled the hegemony 300 of your years ago. Others have been here longer. The Mokari arrived 700 years ago. The Veltar have been hiding here for over 1,000 years." Riley felt a mixture of relief and horror. Relief that humanity wasn't alone in their exile, but horror at the thought of hiding in the darkness for 1,000 years. The Mokari were warriors, tall and proud even in defeat. Their leader, General Lekmer, showed them holographic displays of Imperial fleet movements. "The hunters are following your trail," he warned. "They have bioships that can track the chemical signatures left by your engines. No matter how far you run, they will eventually find you." "Then what do we do?" Riley asked. "You do what we have all done. You scatter, you hide, you survive one more day and hope your children can do the same." But it was the architects who offered real hope. These ancient beings had created the hegemony's artificial intelligence systems thousands of years ago, only to watch their creation turn against them. They were the oldest exiles, the first to flee into the void. Their leader, a being calling itself Prime Constructor, explained the terrible truth. The hegemony is not expanding randomly. They seek something specific, genetic diversity. Every species they conquer adds to their biological database. They are building something, but we do not know what. Dr. Webb spent days studying architect technology and Imperial intelligence. What he discovered made him call an emergency meeting of all the exile leaders. "The hegemony isn't just conquering for resources," he announced. "They're collecting the genetic material of every intelligent species in the galaxy. Based on these patterns, I think they're trying to create a master race, a perfect combination of all the species they've absorbed." The revelation changed everything. The exiles weren't just running from conquerors. They were the last free genetic samples of their species, the only thing standing between the hegemony and total biological dominance of the galaxy. General Lekmer stood up, his scarred face grim. "Then we cannot simply hide anymore. If we are the last free samples of our people, we have a responsibility to ensure those samples survive." Prime Constructor activated a holographic display showing the galactic core. "There's another option. The hegemony's central control systems are located in our old homeworld. If someone could reach it." "That's suicide," Captain Rodriguez interrupted. "Their homeworld is protected by 1,000 fleets. Perhaps But the alternative is hiding. Here until they find us all, one by one. Riley looked around at the assembled leaders, beings from dozens of worlds, all reduced to refugees living in the darkness between stars. Some had been running for centuries. Others, like humanity, had just begun their exile. How long before the hunters catch up to us? She asked. General Thekmore checked his sensor readings. The nearest Imperial scout fleet is 6 weeks behind you. But they are gaining speed. Our estimates suggest they will find this location within 3 months. 3 months to decide the fate of not just humanity, but all the free species in the galaxy. Riley felt the weight of billions of lives pressing down on her shoulders. Then we need to make a choice, she said quietly. Do we keep running forever, or do we find a way to stop running? The debate that followed would determine whether the exiles remained forever hidden or finally struck back at the empire that had stolen their worlds. The meeting that would decide the fate of the galaxy took place in the cargo bay of the New Horizon. Representatives from 7 different species sat around a makeshift table, their alien forms creating shadows under the harsh work lights. Commander. Riley Chun looked at each face, some human, some barely recognizable as living beings, and realized she was part of something that had never happened before in galactic history. The hegemony has been hunting us for over 1,000 years, said Prime Constructor, the ancient architect whose people had accidentally created the monster that now ruled half the galaxy. In all that time, we have never worked together. Each species fled alone, hiding in separate corners of the void. General Thekmore, the scarred Makari warrior, slammed his fist on the table. And look where it has gotten us. Scattered, weak, slowly dying in the darkness while they grow stronger. My people were proud warriors. Now we live like rats in the walls of space. Dr. Alex Webb had been studying the intelligence reports that each species brought to the meeting. The picture they painted was terrifying. The hegemony controlled over 300 star systems. Their bioships could regenerate damage faster than conventional weapons could cause it. Their artificial intelligence networks coordinated fleets across thousands of light years. According to these reports, Webb said, spreading data tablets. Across the table, the hegemony has conquered 47 different intelligent species in the last 1,000 years. Each time, they absorb the best of that species' genetics and technology. The Zephyrian representative, a crystal being whose name sounded like singing wind chimes, spoke through her translator device. Our philosophers have long wondered about their ultimate purpose. Why conquer so many worlds? Why absorb so many different forms of life? Webb pulled up a holographic display showing genetic patterns from captured Imperial specimens. I think I know why. They're not just building an empire. They're building themselves into something new. Each species they conquer adds to their genetic library. They're trying to become the perfect life form. Captain Elena Rodriguez, who had become the unofficial spokesperson for humanity's refugees, asked the question everyone was thinking. And if they succeed? Then there won't be any need for diversity in the galaxy, Prime Constructor answered. They will be the only species worth preserving. All others will be eliminated as inferior. The revelation hit the room like a cold wind. They weren't just fighting for their freedom anymore. They were fighting for the right of life itself, too. Be diverse and unpredictable. Riley stood up, walking to the viewport where she could see the exile fleet stretching into the distance. Thousands of ships from dozens of species, all filled with the last free members of their races. Children who would grow up knowing only the darkness between stars. Elderly beings who would die without ever seeing their homeworlds again. What's the plan? She asked, turning back to the group. Prime Constructor activated another holographic display, this one showing the galactic core. The hegemony central. Control systems are located on our former homeworld. It is now called the Imperial Throne. Every bioship, every artificial intelligence, every automated system in their empire receives commands from that world. So we destroy it, General Thekmore said immediately. Impossible, replied the Veltar representative, a being whose tentacled form rippled with bioluminescent patterns. The Imperial throne is protected by over 1,000 fleets. It would take the combined forces of 50 star nations to even approach it. But what if we didn't need to fight our way there? Webb asked, studying the technical specifications that Prime Constructor had provided. What if we could get inside without them knowing? Over the next several days, a plan took shape that was so dangerous and unlikely that it just might work. The architects still had access codes to their old creation, backdoors, built into the original artificial intelligence systems. The Zephyrians had developed stealth technology during their centuries of hiding. The Mokari had detailed intelligence on Imperial fleet movements, and humanity brought something none of the other species possessed: the desperate courage of people who had nothing left to lose. But the plan required a sacrifice that made everyone uncomfortable. A small strike team would have to penetrate to the Imperial throne while the main exile fleets engaged Imperial forces in a massive diversionary battle. The strike team would have only one chance to upload a virus into the central control systems. A virus that would turn every Imperial artificial intelligence against its organic masters. The backlash will destroy the entire planet, Prime Constructor warned. Anyone on the surface when the virus activates will not survive. Riley felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her. They were asking people to volunteer for certain death, and she would have to be one of them. Young Tommy Walsh, the 8-year-old boy who had asked his mother when they were going home, was playing in the corridor outside the meeting room. He had made friends with a Zephyrian child whose crystalline body sparkled like a living diamond. Despite being from different species, they had found a way to play games together, laughing as they chased each other through the ship's corridors. Watching them, Riley realized what they were really fighting for. Not just survival, but the right of different species to exist together, to learn from each other, to grow stronger through diversity rather than through conquest. "How many volunteers do we need for the strike team?" she asked. 50 beings. Maximum, Prime Constructor replied. More than that, and we increase the chance of detection. Captain Rodriguez immediately stepped forward. "I'll pilot the strike ship," Dr. Webb nodded, "and I'll handle the technical aspects of uploading the virus." One by one, volunteers came forward, Mokari warriors eager for one last battle. Zephyrian, scientists determined to preserve knowledge. Veltar engineers who had spent centuries maintaining the exile fleets. And humans, farmers from Mars, miners from the asteroid belt, teachers from Luna Station, all willing to die so that their children could live free. The hardest part was choosing who would stay with the fleets. Someone had to guide the survivors if the mission failed. Someone had to protect the children and the elderly during the diversionary battle. Riley found herself assigned to stay with the main fleet, a decision that felt like cowardice even though she knew it was necessary. As the commander of the evacuation, she was needed to coordinate the massive refugee fleet during what would likely be the largest space battle in galactic history. The strike team prepared to depart in a modified Zephyrian stealth ship, its crystal hull designed to bend light and sensor beams around it. Dr. Webb spent his final hours creating multiple copies of the virus. Determined that at least one would reach its target even if everything else failed, General Thekmore addressed the combined exile fleets before the mission began. His words were translated into dozens of languages and broadcast to every ship in the hidden armada. "For 1,000 years, we have run from our enemies. We have hidden in the darkness, raised our children in exile, and watched our cultures slowly fade away. Today, we choose to run no more." The exile fleet began to move toward the Imperial border, carrying with it the hopes and fears of every free being in the galaxy. Behind them, the strike team disappeared into the void, racing toward a confrontation that would either free the galaxy or doom the last remnants of diversity to extinction. Riley stood on the bridge of the New Horizon, watching the stars shift as they entered hyperspace. In her pocket, she carried a small photograph, the last picture ever taken of Earth from space, showing the blue marble that had given birth to humanity. Soon they would either return to reclaim their stolen worlds, or they would die trying. But either way, they would die free. The Imperial throne was a world of nightmares. Once the beautiful homeworld of the architects, it had been transformed into a massive organic computer. Biomechanical towers stretched into the clouds, pulsing with the neural networks that controlled every Imperial ship in the galaxy. The planet's surface crawled with living circuits, and the very air hummed with electronic signals. Captain Elena Rodriguez guided the stealth ship through the outer defenses, her hands steady on controls that barely responded to her touch. The Zephyrian technology was amazing, but it required a delicate touch that human reflexes weren't designed for. Behind her, Dr. Alex Webb checked his equipment one final time, the virus-containing device secured in a protective case. "How long? Until we reach the surface?" whispered Lieutenant Jackie Torres, the communications officer who had volunteered for the mission despite having a newborn daughter back with the refugee fleet. 15 minutes, Elena replied softly. "And then we're committed." Thousands of light years away, Commander Riley Chun watched the exile fleet emerge from hyperspace at the edge of Imperial territory. The sight that greeted them was exactly what they had feared, a massive Imperial armada waiting in perfect formation. Admiral Kethver had anticipated their move. "They knew we were coming," General Thekmar growled over the communication channel from his flagship. "The diversionary attack won't work if they're already prepared for us?" Riley felt her heart sink, but then she realized something. Maybe that's exactly what we need. If they're focused on us, they're not watching their homeworld. The battle that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. Ships from 7 different species fought side by side against the biofleets of the hegemony. Zephyrian crystal ships fired beams of pure light while Mokari warships charged directly into enemy formations, their warriors singing battle songs that had been silent for centuries. The New Horizon, never designed for combat, found itself in the middle of the fighting. Riley had to make split-second decisions as Imperial bioships targeted the refugee vessels. Children and elderly beings huddled in the cargo bays while the ship shook under enemy fire. "Shields at 30%, reported the tactical officer. "We can't take much more of this." But the exile fleet wasn't trying to win the battle. They were trying to buy time, and every minute they survived was another minute for the strike team to complete their mission on the Imperial throne. Elena's team had managed to land their stealth ship in the ruins of what had once been the architect capital city. The buildings were still there, but they had been consumed by organic growths that pulsed with data streams. It was like walking through the nervous system of a giant beast. Dr. Webb led them through streets that had become biological circuits, following maps that Prime Constructor had provided before the mission. The central control complex was just ahead, a massive structure that looked more like a living heart than a building. "The security systems are all biological," Webb explained as they approached the entrance. "They'll recognize Imperial genetics, but they should ignore us completely." They were wrong. The moment they stepped inside the complex, alarms began to sound. Not mechanical sirens, but organic wails that came from the walls themselves. The building knew they didn't belong there. "Run!" Elena shouted, leading the team deeper into the complex as Imperial security forces began to converge on their position. The central control chamber was a vast sphere filled with floating neural clusters, each one processing information from thousands of star systems. Webb immediately began setting up his equipment while the rest of the team established a defensive perimeter. "How long?" Torres asked, firing her weapon at the Imperial guards who were trying to break through their hastily constructed barricade. 5 minutes, Webb called back, his hands flying over the control interfaces. "The virus needs to integrate with their base systems before I can activate it." Meanwhile, in space above them, the exile fleet was being slowly destroyed. Ships that had carried refugees for months were breaking apart under Imperial fire. Riley watched helplessly as the Martian Dream, the same ship that had rescued evacuees from Mars, exploded in a ball of flame. But for every exile ship that fell, they took Imperial vessels with them. The Mokari had developed new tactics during their centuries of guerrilla warfare. The Zephyrians had learned to use their crystal ships as living prisms, focusing multiple energy beams into devastating attacks. Young Tommy Walsh, the boy who had asked when they were going home, was helping tend to the wounded in the New Horizons medical bay. He had grown up during the months of exile, becoming one of the many children who knew more about space battles than playground games. "Are we winning?" he asked Dr. Nina Patel as she worked to save an injured Veltar engineer. Dr. Patel looked out the porthole at the battle raging around them. "We're not trying to win, honey. We're trying to give our friends enough time to end this war for everyone." Back on the Imperial throne, Webb's virus was finally ready. The device in his hands contained the hopes of every free species in the galaxy, a program designed to turn the hegemony's greatest strength against itself. "Uploading now," he announced, connecting the device to the central neural cluster. The effect was immediate and terrifying. The organic walls around them began to convulse as the virus spread through the planetary computer system. Error messages appeared on displays throughout the complex, written in languages from dozens of conquered species. "It's working," Webb said with amazement. "The virus is spreading faster than I calculated. It's using the hegemony's own communication networks to infect every connected system in the galaxy. But their success came with a price. The planet itself was beginning to destabilize as its biological systems turned against each other. Cracks appeared in the walls as the neural networks that held the world together began to fail. Elena grabbed Webb's arm. "We need to leave now. The upload isn't complete," Webb protested. "If I disconnect too early, the virus might not reach all the Imperial fleets." Torres made the decision for him. "I'll stay and monitor the upload. You two get back to the ship." "Jackie?" "No," Elena said. "We all go together or none of us go." But Torres was already pushing them toward the exit. "Someone has to make sure this works. My daughter needs a galaxy where she can grow up free." Webb grabbed his backup drives and followed Elena as the building began to collapse around them. Behind them, Torres remained at the control station, ensuring the virus completed its spread to every corner of the Imperial network. The effect on the space battle was immediate. Imperial bioships suddenly turned on each other as their artificial intelligence systems received conflicting commands. The massive coordination that had made the hegemony invincible for thousands of years dissolved into chaos in a matter of minutes. Riley watched in amazement as the Imperial fleet tore itself apart. Ships that had been firing on the exile forces moments before were now attacking their own allies. The bioships' living hulls writhed in apparent agony as their computer systems fought against each other. "All Imperial ships are showing system failures," reported the communications officer. "Their fleet is completely disabled." The Imperial throne planet was visibly breaking apart now, massive chunks of its surface flying off into space as its biological infrastructure failed. The virus had spread so completely that it was destroying the very foundation of Imperial power. Elena and Webb barely made it back to their stealth ship as the surface beneath them cracked and shifted. Behind them, the control complex collapsed entirely, taking Torres with it. As they lifted off, they could see similar destruction across the entire planet. "She did it," Webb said quietly, watching the Imperial throne tear itself apart. Torres made sure the virus reached everything. In the months that followed, the news spread across the galaxy. The hegemony empire, which had seemed invincible for millennia, was gone. Their fleets were disabled, their communication networks destroyed, their central authority eliminated. Species that had been enslaved for generations found themselves suddenly free. The freedom came at a terrible cost. Of the 3 billion humans who had fled Earth, fewer than 800,000 survived to see the empire's fall. Other species had suffered similar losses. The galaxy was free, but it was also nearly empty. Riley stood in the observation deck of the New Horizon as the refugee fleet prepared to return to human space. Earth was waiting for them, its blue oceans and green continents unchanged, despite everything that had happened. Tommy Walsh, now 9, years old and wiser than any child should be, joined her at the viewport. "Are we really going home?" he asked. Riley put her hand on his shoulder, looking at the planet that had given birth to humanity. "Yes, but it's going to be different now." "We're different now," the boy nodded solemnly. Mom says we're not just humans anymore. We're survivors. As the ship approached Earth, Riley thought about all the people who had died to make this moment possible. Torres and her sacrifice. The volunteers who had stayed behind at distant colonies. The millions who had died during the Exodus. They had paid the ultimate price for freedom, but looking at Tommy and the other children who had grown up among the stars, Riley realized that their sacrifice had created something new.